How we doing? Wishing you a sweet, festive, joyous Lag BaOmer. Hasn't quite started here in LA. It's still daytime, but tonight, today or last night, we counted the 32nd day of the Omer. When one reaches the counting of the Omer, the 50 days we count between the second day of Passover and Shavuos, the revelation at Mount Sinai, when we reach the 33rd day, there is a festival. Let me just open up my, pardon me, I want to get the live video in front of me. What's going on here? So I can see the comments. Here we go. And make sure it's muted. Fabulous. Stephen Geyer in the house, Melissa Beineman, Yehudit Sobel, Rochelle Rosen, Stephanie Pink Mama Frieden. How's that for a nickname? Janice Beanstalk. It's great to see you all. And over on the YouTube side, let me get that in front of me. Okay, very good. And James Roth is over there. Great to see you all. So when we reach Lag BaOmer, which literally means the 33rd day of the Omer, Lamed Gimel, using the letters which are also numbers in Hebrew, we celebrate. And there's been a restriction for these first 33 days of the Omer where we adopt certain practices of the mourner, like we don't shave, we don't listen to live music. And that goes all the way back to Talmudic times. And the awful plague which struck the students, the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. They all died between Passover and the 33rd day, but miraculously the plague ended on the 33rd day of the Omer, and we celebrate that. And Lag BaOmer is also associated with a yahrzeit. It is the yahrzeit of the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And we heard one of his stories, or perhaps the principal story of Shimon Bar Yochai some days ago, last week, a few weeks ago. And he is the one who hid with his son, Rabbi Elazar, in a cave for 12 years, and then an additional year because they weren't ready to come out. And they had to hide in the cave because the Roman authorities wanted to kill Shimon Bar Yochai. And he had to hide. He had to hide in this cave, but he used his time wisely, and he and his son, sharpened each other's mind, and they went deeper in their Torah study, and in fact went on an incredible mystical journey in their Torah study. And when they came out of it, basically what Shimon Bar Yochai brought was the core knowledge that would become the Zohar, the core text of the Jewish mystical tradition. His yahrzeit begins tonight, the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer. And normally, there are bonfires on this night, especially in Meron, in the north of Israel, where that cave is that Shimon and Elazar were hidden inside for 12 years, plus the additional year. And then that's eventually where they were buried. I'm not sure about the son, but for sure Shimon Bar Yochai is buried there. And now it's been a tradition for hundreds of years that at Lag BaOmer, to celebrate the yahrzeit of the Rashbi, they make enormous bonfires in Meron, and like 200,000 people show up. And bonfires are lit in Jewish communities around the world. And it's a beautiful and festive celebration of Torah and Hasidus and the mystical tradition. And of course, this year, we cannot celebrate in that manner. I believe there is a big bonfire being lit in Meron tonight. I guess it must have already happened, but with only a minyan. There's like 10 guys around this enormous bonfire that is normally lit for 200,000 people. But hey, at least they're keeping the fires burning. And may we only hear good news. May this plague of COVID-19 soon pass, and we can get back to celebrating our simchas together, because we miss each other so much. Okay, let us get into today's daf. Some interesting stuff today. Where are we? We are holding Tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud, chapter 6. Today we're going to look at the 7th and 8th Mishnahs. This is page 66, Daf Samech Vav. And in this Mishnah that we opened today, the 7th Mishnah of chapter 6 is all about with what may a person go out on Shabbos, leave his private domain and enter the public domain. And we've been talking about various accessories, often related to jewelry and other things, even accessories for animals. Today we encounter the teaching that one with an amputated leg may go out on Shabbos with his wooden leg, as it has the legal status of a shoe, per the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosei prohibits. Now we read this, and in the modern mind, I would say recoils. What? Are you kidding me? This is even an issue? A person who has lost his leg has been amputated, and he holds himself up with an artificial leg, and it's a question whether he can go out on Shabbos with his artificial leg? Really? And of course, that's a simplistic understanding. That's not what the issue is. Turns out that the ruling that one may not go out with the artificial leg on Shabbos is only in the case of a leg that is basically decorative, meaning that the person doesn't lean on the leg. It's more like maybe he rides in a wheelchair and he has a leg, for an aesthetic purpose, or maybe even rides around in a bier, B-I-E-R. Is that the correct word? He's seated on a platform and people pull him around on that. And he doesn't actually lean on the artificial leg. So he's not wearing the leg. It's just there for him for an aesthetic purpose. So then you might have thought that he can't take it for that reason. Rabbi Yosei prohibits, but Rabbi Meir permits. So really, there's not a question. Of course, a person who had his leg amputated can go out with an artificial leg. It's not a problem. But what's interesting in our Mishnah, or in the Gemara that discusses the Mishnah, is not so much the rationale for why a person can wear his artificial leg. I mean, the simple reason is, for him, it's a shoe. Anybody can wear a shoe, and if your leg doesn't end in a foot, and then what you attach to the leg, beneath the stump, as it were, whether you're amputated at the shin or the knee or the thigh, whatever you attach to what remains of the leg acts like a shoe, so of course you can wear it. There might have been a concern that this person might come to remove it in the public domain, and then he wouldn't want to lose it, and so he would carry it and violate Shabbos. But as we've seen, where there's no reason to believe that a person would remove the object, and somebody with an artificial leg would really have no reason to remove his artificial leg in the public domain. So we don't worry. We don't have a concern that he'll remove it and come to carry it. The issue here isn't the rationale for why somebody might have thought to prohibit the amputee with going out with his artificial leg, but rather that there was a confusion of who said what. The way we read it in our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir said the amputee may go out with his artificial leg, and Rabbi Yosei said he may not, and the sages hold with Rabbi Meir. This is the permitted way. But other Amoraim, meaning rabbis of the Talmudic period, as opposed to the Mishnaic period, right? So rabbis after the year about 200 of the Common Era and until about the year 500, when the Talmud closed, right, when the Gemara commentary closed, rabbis of that period received conflicting traditions of who said what, right? And so some people said, well, no, it's Rabbi Yosei permits and Rabbi Meir prohibits. So that is important. Not so much because, there's a confusion on the law. It seems that the law is it's permitted. Why do we need to know who said what? Turns out that first of all, we take it very seriously to give a teaching in the name of the sage who created that teaching. It's very important to give proper credit where you heard a teaching of Torah wisdom. It's a great merit to the teacher who gave over that teaching. If people continue to teach in his name, it gives him joy, it gives him nachas, and it even gives him status in the heavenly academy. It's something we can do for our teachers once they're up in heaven, that we continue to transmit teachings in their name. Moreover, because there are other teachings that are more difficult to reconcile and things that were left unresolved and we have to figure out who we're going to follow, it's important to know where the tradition came from so that we can derive other kinds of teachings. And we'll see something like that here in this case. So, various sages were arguing who was it that permitted and who was it that prohibited. Was Meir permitting and Yosei prohibiting, or vice versa? So, the issue was resolved when Rav Hanan bar Rava taught this particular Mishnah to Chia bar Rav in the academy of Rav. So this is in Babylonia, in the academy of Rav, and it was taught before Rav. Rav was davening, so he was praying, sort of off to the side praying, and a teacher of Torah taught something to Chia bar Rav, so I'm guessing that was Rav's son, right? So a teacher of Torah taught this Mishnah to Rav's son while they were in front of Rav. Rav was not part of the class because he was praying. In fact, he was heavily involved in his prayer and not talking to anybody. But he heard the teacher say to Chia that an amputee may go out on, or actually he said an amputee may not go out on Shabbos, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Yosei permits. And Rav went like this. I'm not sure if that's how he signaled, but he signaled with a hand gesture and made his meaning clear. So even though he couldn't interrupt his prayer to talk, he was one of those sections in the prayer service where you can't talk, with hand gestures, he made very clear that they had it wrong, and that Rabbi Meir permits and Rabbi Yosei prohibits the amputee with the wooden leg. An artificial leg back then was a wooden leg. So he says Rabbi Meir permits. And once that was clarified by Rav, the story got around that that's the correct way to do the Mishnah, and sort of all the other Amoraim and other sages of the period fell into line, including Shmuel. Right? So Rav and Shmuel were one of those pairs that were teaching in the same era, disagreed on many things, but had tremendous love and respect for each other. And when Shmuel heard that Rav taught this, reversed the attribution in that Mishnah, Shmuel had learned it the other way, but he submitted his understanding in this matter to Rav and said, okay, I get it. Rabbi Meir permits, Rabbi Yosei prohibits, and that's the way we're going to learn it. And then Shmuel went a little further and said, and this makes sense because Rabbi Meir also permits chalitzah with a wooden sandal. What does that mean? We have a teaching that's in the Torah called, it's referred to in English as levirate marriage. And so what this was all about was that if a Jewish man was married to a Jewish woman and they had not yet had children when the man died, so he left no heir, but he did have a brother. So his brother should marry his brother's widow, and then the first child of that union would be considered the heir of the dead brother, right? So that he would be considered legally the son of the one who passed, and then the subsequent children, would be children of both the father and mother of this new marriage. Now, you can imagine that these people didn't necessarily love each other, and maybe they didn't want to marry each other. Either she didn't want to or he didn't want to. If they chose not to enter into this marriage for whatever reason, so then they would go through a ceremony called chalitzah, in which, because normally the way this works is that the woman is assumed that she would want this because she lost her husband and now she's without a footing in ancient society. And so it would be assumed that she would want that, and that it would be her brother-in-law who would sort of refuse to do it. And so if he refused to do it, they would go through a ceremony that was meant to embarrass him. Embarrass him how? She would remove his sandal from his foot and hold it up and say, this is a guy who doesn't live up to his obligation within Israel to marry his dead brother's widow when he should. I can't remember right now. She might even hit him with it. Certainly it's a ceremonial strike. It's not like she slaps him hard with it. But the point is the public ceremony. And it needs to be that he's wearing a sandal and it comes off his foot, and then they go through this declaration. And it might be that both of them choose not to do it, so they don't make it such an embarrassing ceremony, but they still have to do the elements of that ceremony, removing the sandal and saying those words. And so the question had been asked, what if it's not his sandal? What if the sandal is taken off the wrong foot? Or what if the ceremony is conducted with a wooden sandal? What's a wooden sandal? A wooden sandal is actually not a sandal at all. It's something that masons use when they're smoothing out some kind of cement, and they use these wooden sandals as part of their work. Sometimes they wear it on the foot, but it's really part of the work. It's not really a shoe, but it's worn on the foot. So is that close enough so that the chalitzah performed with a wooden sandal is a valid chalitzah? And Rabbi Meir said, yes, it is a valid chalitzah, even if performed with a wooden sandal. And so now Shmuel says that it makes sense that Rabbi Meir would say that a wooden leg counts as a shoe for the purpose of going out on Shabbos, just as a wooden sandal counts as a shoe for the chalitzah ceremony. And that's what I had to say about Mishnah number 7. Let us move on now. These Mishnahs are starting to come quicker with short, less commentary in between, because these Mishnahs here in this chapter 6 are starting to become very particular. So there's not that much commentary about them because they're already pretty specific. Mishnah number 8 says that young boys may go outside on Shabbos with knots, like a knot in a shoelace with knots. Does it specify on their arm? I believe it might. No, it just says may go out with knots, and princes may go out with bells, right? So we're not sure so much now about the bells that a prince wears. Interesting, a donkey may not go out with a bell, but a prince may. Makes sense, because when a donkey goes out with a bell on Shabbos, it sends the wrong message, as if we're going to market and look at my nice donkey, I want to sell it. We don't do that on Shabbos. But a prince, presumably, he's nobility and he likes people to know that he's coming, and so the bells that are on his clothing are really more part of his clothing, or an adornment that's truly an adornment for him, and so it is permitted on Shabbos. But what I want to talk about here is these knots. What does it mean that a young boy may go out with knots? And so the Gemara asks, what does it mean that a young boy may go out with knots? The first suggestion given is that, this refers to a medicinal knot. What kind of a knot? It's actually a garland made out of a bunch of madder plants, M-A-D-D-E-R, madder plant. And we learned from Abaye, who learned from his foster mother, that the madder plant is a very effective remedy, and that if you make a bundle, with 3 madder plants, it will stop a disease from getting worse, and 5 madder plants, it will cure your disease, and 7 madder plants, is effective even against sorcery. sorcery, right? So it will protect you even if sorcerers are trying to attack you with their spells. So it seems like, oh, okay, a knot, you can go out with a knot, which is a garland of the madder plant. Except that doesn't really make sense, because if a garland of the madder plant is effective to prevent or to cure disease or even to save you from sorcery, why would that only apply to young boys? That should apply to boys and girls, young and old. So it seems that that was not what is meant by these knots. And so, let me see who it is that comes along. So rather, Avin Bar Huna said in the name of Rav Hama Bar Guria that what these knots refer to is a young boy who misses his dad. Okay? So obviously, young girls have an important relationship with their dads, just like young boys have an important relationship with their dads. And young boys have an important relationship with their mom, just like young girls have an important relationship with their mom. But there's some kind of, one of those four relationships, young boys with their dads, has a particularly, kind of painful longing. And it's not really explained more than that. Why does the young boy long for his dad who is absent in some way? But it makes me think, I wonder if this particular tradition began during a time of war when the dads would be going off to war as soldiers. Right? And these boys are really afraid that the dad won't come back and won't be there to teach him what he has to learn as a young man who's going to become a man. So at any rate, what these knots refer to is that the dad would take a strap off the right shoe. Unclear if it's the boy's right shoe or his own right shoe. I'm guessing from his right shoe, right? From his own right shoe. And then he would tie it on the boy's left arm and put some knots in it. And so it's not too much of a stretch to imagine, just like tefillin is tied on the left arm, that what the dad was saying is, you should think of me when you see this strap on your left arm, and I'll be back soon with God's help, and then I'll teach you when you get older how to put on tefillin and wear it properly. And it's a kind of a reminder of the dad and of the fact that the dad, will teach him what a young man needs to learn from his dad. We think that's what it's all about. Having said that, and having introduced the previous interpretation that perhaps the knots refer to a garland of madder plants, we now enter a little string of remedies from this time. And we're going to encounter a lot of these. The Talmud, over its 2,700 pages, from time to time, we encounter quite a few remedies that were back then. Right? They didn't have medical schools. They didn't have the kind of medical science that we have now. But they had many traditions on cures for conditions that people had. And so now we'll encounter a few of those. So one thing that was permitted on Shabbos was cupping. All right. Now, I know this cupping was around even into the 19th century, maybe even in the 20th century. And some people do it today. If you remember Michael Phelps in the Olympics, and a bunch of swimmers in that Olympics, had these like rings. They were almost like circular hickeys all over their skin. And it's this practice called cupping, which sort of draws blood to the surface. And it can be done by sort of like heating up the air inside of a glass cup, and then, sort of putting it tightly on the skin. And then I guess as the air cools, there's a vacuum in there, and it pulls blood toward the surface of the skin. So you might think that's a sort of thing that we cannot do on Shabbos. And certainly we can't heat up that glass by lighting a fire. There's no kindling. But if you just take some hot water that's already present on Shabbos, put it in the glass, pour it out, and then put the cup on someone's stomach, and that makes them feel better for a stomach ache or whatever was indicated for at that time, so that was permitted. Likewise, it was permitted if somebody hurt their neck to put a neck brace on them. And some say it was actually a condition that had to do more with an internal condition that could be treated by pressing on the veins in the neck, and that was permitted. Why would we think that these treatments would not be permitted? And the answer is medication is problematic on Shabbos. There was an original decree in the Talmud and elsewhere, not on this page, but that the rabbis prohibited medication on Shabbos. Obviously, this doesn't apply if it's to save a life. To save a life, we desecrate Shabbos. We don't think twice about it. But if it's just to alleviate discomfort, and it's a discomfort the person could deal with, we don't medicate. Why? Because if we allowed medication, then a person might come to grind the medicine on Shabbos. If you needed to grind the medication to save a life, you desecrate Shabbos, you grind the medication. But if it's not a life-saving situation, we don't want people grinding, because grinding is for sure one of the forbidden labors on Shabbos, and we don't want them making medicines. But the treatments that we're talking about here are not medication. Cupping, a neck brace, swaddling a baby, permitted on Shabbos. And then we have a lovely little paragraph that I'll just read to you. And Avin Bar Huna said that Rav Chama Bar Guria said, it is permissible to smear oil and salt on oneself on Shabbos. As in this case of Rav Huna, who departed from the house of Rav, and Rav, who departed from the house of Rabbi Chia, and Rabbi Chia, who departed from the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, when they were drunk. So this is a treatment for somebody who's drunk. And for when they were drunk. And the rabbi would bring oil and salt and rub them on the palms of their hands and the soles of their feet and say, just as this oil is clear, so let the wine of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, his mother, become clear. Because whenever we make an incantation, and this is an incantation, and we actually learn on this same daf, whenever we recite an incantation for healing, we mention a person's mom. The merit of the mom is thought to have a much greater healing energy than the merit of the father. And that's why even today, when we pray for a refuah shlema, complete healing, complete and speedy recovery, right, a healing for a person who's ill, we always mention the person's name, the son or daughter of, and then the mother's name. And so here as well. So just as this oil is clear, so let the wine of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, his mom, become clear. In other words, let them become sober. And if he could not bring oil and salt, or if they did not work, he would bring the sealing clay of a barrel, sealing, S-E-A-L-I-N-G, the clay that you use to seal a barrel, and soak it in water and say, just as this sealing clay is clear, so let the wine of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, his mom, become clear. So, I don't know if it works, but if you ever find yourself inebriated and you need to sober up quickly, perhaps you can find somebody to bring some oil and salt, right? Oil and salt, rub them on the palms of their hands and the soles of your feet and say, just as this oil is clear, so let the wine of this person who is drunk become clear. And perhaps it will work. And may we never need to try it because we're not so inebriated that we need to sober up. But if we do become that inebriated and we need to sober up, perhaps we'll try this Talmudic remedy for drunkenness. And that, my friends, oh, and I just had one other remedy, Talmudic remedy that's shared here on this daf, and this is the preservation stone. The preservation stone. I don't know how a stone becomes a preservation stone. It's not detailed here. However it happens, a preservation stone was meant to help a pregnant woman carry her baby to term safely. A preservation stone would ward off against miscarriage. And so if a woman was pregnant, she could take her preservation stone and go out with it on Shabbos. Now, I don't know if the preservation stone would be attached on a cord around her neck, I doubt they would let her carry it if there was any alternative to that. So probably it was on some kind of a cord or attached to her clothing, because there would be some way to do that. So you might think that, okay, if the woman is pregnant and has a fear of miscarrying, so she can carry the preservation stone, but if there's no reason to worry about miscarriage, can she wear it? Answer, yes. She can take the preservation stone out on Shabbos even if she has no reason to suspect that she would miscarry. So, okay, in the case of a woman who is pregnant, for sure, she can carry the preservation stone. What about a woman who might be pregnant, but she's not sure? Answer, yes. She can take the preservation stone. And not only can all of these women go out on Shabbos with a preservation stone, they can also go out with its counterweight. What is the counterweight? It's another stone that weighs exactly the same amount as the preservation stone. You may not adjust a stone in order to make it the same weight. You can't chip away at it. But if you found a stone that weighs the same as the preservation stone, so then it's called the counterweight of the preservation stone, and a woman could go out with that on Shabbos because it would somehow prevent miscarriage. That's what I've got for us today. I'm going to check the comments, see what's going on. Lynn is asking, was the ant released after the ceremony? If not, why? The concern it might have already been used by someone else. I haven't discussed the ant. That has to do with a little ceremony a person undertakes if they're ill. Even though it's at the end of today's daf, I'm going to discuss that tomorrow with God's help. And let me check over here on the Facebook side. Melissa Beinman, would you put the stone away after 40 weeks? Certainly by 42 weeks, I wouldn't keep it so close. Makes sense to me. And you know, it's funny, we might hear about these remedies and be tempted to chuckle and say, well, you know, these people lived 2,000 years ago and they were so primitive, and you know, we're so advanced and we've benefited from the scientific tradition in the intervening centuries, and aren't we superior? But we should resist that. We should resist that, because while it may well be true, perhaps completely true, that the majority, or that many, or the majority, or who knows which, that these remedies, we wouldn't use them today for one reason or another. We should not be so smug as to believe that they didn't work back then. It was a different world, and that world of 2,000 years ago was much closer in time to ancient Israel, in which revealed miracles happened, well, in the time of the first temple, on a daily basis. In the first temple, there were 10 miracles that occurred every day. The fire of the altar, the freshness of the showbreads. I mean, the idea that miracles happened more often in earlier times is something that we need to understand. And it's sort of like the world sort of steadily became more fixed and less miraculous. Maybe that's why a lot of these remedies don't work now. We don't know. But it is not for us to feel smug about cures from an earlier time. And not only that, when we're talking about a preservation stone to ward off miscarriage, I remember clearly here in LA, this must have been 15 years ago, there was a restaurant, I think it was called Coyote, but not coyote like, you know, the small wolf that looks like a dog. Coyote is an Italian word. I forget what it means. But they had a salad dressing at that restaurant that women who were overdue to deliver their babies, you know, it happened that they would, you know, go eat that salad, and then almost invariably then, you know, they would go to the hospital and have their baby. And I mean, you couldn't get a table at that restaurant because there were so many, you know, extremely pregnant women having dinner at that restaurant. So the idea that people believed and used these kind of folk-based remedies in ancient times, but that, you know, we've outgrown that, is nonsense. There's all kinds of things that are active in our world, perhaps in our culture, that someone from another culture might chuckle at. But we shouldn't think that, you know, that we've outgrown all folk remedies, as it were. And Teresa Densmore says, I am over 70 and use herbs only and take no medications, and I am very healthy. Bless his name. Amen. Teresa Densmore, may you take your regimen and have it keep you healthy to 120. Absolutely. Any other questions that I need to see? How many madder plants for a pandemic? Does anyone know about the use of madder plants, in modern times? If this is something that somebody happens to know about, there's an article about it, please share in the comments. I think that'd be really interesting. Okay, so that's what I've got for us today. May we all be privileged to stay healthy or to recover if we're unhealthy right now, especially people suffering from the pandemic. Check out. I think that you can probably find video. Maybe it's even going on right now still in Israel, the bonfire in Meron, celebrating Lag BaOmer. And there's definitely a music concert, almost like a telethon. There's a big fundraiser going on for Hatzolah. Hatzolah is it's a Jewish first aid emergency responder organization in all the big Jewish communities. There's a big one here in LA, and another one in Brooklyn, another one in Rockland County, and many branches of Hatzolah in Jewish communities. It's all run by volunteers. They often show up faster than the ambulance. They're trained as paramedics. It's a wonderful organization. They're having a big 24-hour fundraiser, but they're also having a concert of great Jewish music, big singers. Benny Friedman, I saw he was on there. Lipa, I can't remember the whole lineup. But you go to United Protection. Let me just make sure I got that. UnitedForProtection.com. That's UnitedForProtection.com. You can catch the concert. You should make a donation to Hatzolah. It's a fantastic organization. I made a donation. I recommend that you do it too.